Long ago, Queen Marika commanded Sir Messmer to purge the tower folk, a cleansing by fire. It's no wonder the Hornsent holds the Erdtree in contempt. That aside, man is by nature a creature of conquest, and in this regard the tower folk are no different. They were never saints, they just happened to be on the losing side of a war.
In the pursuit of divinity, the Hornsent committed unthinkable acts against those that they conquered. Attempting to evoke the power of the primordial crucible, where all life was once melded together, the Hornsent mutilated and combined the bodies of those that they subjugated to feed their spiral tower as it reaches towards the heavens. Marika's people were of particular importance to this practice, as their flesh was said to meld harmoniously with others. The suffering of the shamans cannot be understated. They were maimed by whips covered in rotten, misshapen teeth, poisoning their wounds so they grow inflamed and ooze pus, allowing them to be grafted to other prisoners more effectively. Even more horrifically, it seems that the shamans maintained consciousness throughout this process, and became cursed by the rancorous spirits of the prisoners who shared their fate. Finally, they were stuffed into jars to be stored in the frozen gales across Hornsent territory, awaiting their fate to become part of Vanir Lim. This grotesque practice originated in Bonny Village. This place is embodied by the caterpillar mask, a ritual implement of the greater potentates of Bonny Village, used to ward off thoughts of impurity, doubt, temptation, and other wickedness one is vulnerable to while absorbed in divine ritual. These masks rendered the potentates merciless and unrelenting in their treatment of the shamans. Just outside Bonny Village, we find two of the most mysterious objects in all of Elden Ring: the shed skin of a large serpent and a shaman transfigured into a tree, from which we receive the O Mother gesture. A pair of breadcrumbs which, together, tell a story. The story of Messmer and Marika and the birth of a ruinous curse.
No, Mother. Forgive me.
First of all, it is important to understand what snakes and serpents represent in the lands between, because they are, essentially, the antithesis of the Golden Order. The duelist Greathelm tells us, the snake is viewed as a traitor to the Erdtree, and the audience delighted in seeing these bronze effigies beaten and battered. So, what is it about serpents that make them such a reviled symbol? Serpents are closely associated with fire. The ancient snake-worshipping cult of Gelmir established themselves around an active volcano. The Forge of the Giants, which contains the fell god's flame of ruin, is decorated with serpents. The black flame-worshipping godskin nobles and apostles have assimilated snake-like physiology. Interestingly, I do not believe that snakes have an inherent fire that they produce naturally. Instead, snakes seem to seek fire and harness its power. The hex known as Mount Gelmir's Fury states that this sorcery is held to represent the fury of the volcano, but the arrogance of attempting to harness it is solely that of men and serpents. The snake men of Gelmir utilize the magma of the mountain and form it into weapons, but have no fire attacks of their own. The godskin's black flame is channeled from the rune of death. Even the god-devouring serpent's fire likely originates either from Rykard's magma sorceries, or from the fire of the volcano it resides inside. The Volcano Manor's snakes practice a religion of sacrifice, as seen in their red glintstone staff, which is formed from the blood of sacrifices, as well as in the serpent god's curved sword, which is a ritual implement used to offer up sacrifices. This culture is essentially a doomsday cult, and the purpose of these sacrifices was to cause the end of the world. The description of the Devourer's scepter states, "A scepter in the shape of a serpent devouring the world, a vision of the future briefly seen by Rykard in his final moments before being devoured by the great serpent." And so, it becomes clear that snakes are creatures of ruin who covet a destructive end. Because fire is also linked to the concept of ruin, seen most clearly in the giant's flame, the serpents desire its power. This is why snakes are viewed as the ancient enemy of the Golden Order. The Erd Tree was intended to be eternal, and so snakes, which represent an ending, are considered traitorous. The Catch Flame incantation tells us that the flame of ruin is anathema to the Erd Tree, but prophets sometimes glimpse it within the faith all the same. Fire's deadly sin expands on this prophecy. The prophet despaired, looking up at the Erd Tree, for soon the kindling would burst into flame, bringing ruin. I don't think it's a stretch to say that serpents are despised by the Golden Order because of their association with the fiery end, the Erd Tree. The depraved perfumer robe depicts this clearly. The embroidery on the apron is itself a curse upon the Erd Tree, a snake coiling around the tree, representing its end. So, the next question we must answer is why Marika the Eternal, the one who established a golden order of abundance, would have a child that embodies its polar opposite: fire, ruin, and death. I believe we can find the answer by investigating the shamans and Bonny Village. Let me tell you a story that begins before the age of the Erd Tree, during the peak of the Tower Folk's power. The shamans were a peaceful people with close associations to trees, who inhabited a small village in the hinterlands. They practice a form of ancestral worship, making offerings to the grandmother, who in death seems to have taken on an arboreal form. There are strong parallels between this culture and the shamans of the ancestral woods in Seofer River. The shining horned headband, which is worn by the ancestral follower shamans, states that horns with buds that shine are ideal ceremonial items for ancestral worship. Aside from using the common terminology of shaman, these two separate cultures are linked by ancestral worship and links to the crucible. We have discussed the similarities between horns and trees in relation to the crucible at length in other videos, but the most relevant part for this topic is that both horns and trees grow new buds by absorbing the bodies and spirits of the dead. It is this aspect of the shaman, their tree-like nature, which the Tower Folk realized could be harnessed to meld life together, channeling the crucible to reach divinity. The Hornsent's culture is heavily based upon the idea of sacrificing individuality for the goal of reaching divinity. The Curseblade's attire tells us, in order to ascend from their mortal flesh into the tutelary deities of the land, they heighten their spirituality through severe aesthetic training. They believe that the path to divinity involves sacrificing the self, and believe this so strongly they are willing to force this way of thinking onto others. This is why they came to view the shaman's nature as a potential recipient for the life force of others as their sole purpose. As the Hornsent ghost in the whipping hut outside of Bonny Village says, "For shamans like you, this is your lot. Life were you accorded for this alone." Regardless of what the shamans themselves wanted, in the Hornsent's eyes, the individual is only an obstacle in the way of their divine purpose. The Hornsent conquered the shaman village, enslaving its people and marching them to Bonny Village. It is there, in this jar-obsessed place, that the Hornsent came to realize how these beings could be used towards their divine goal. But one shaman was not like the others, an Empyrean chosen by the Two Fingers from birth as a candidate for godhood, Marika. She witnessed the torture her people were subjected to under the guise of a divine ritual. The Hornsent were their oppressors, their torturers, who viewed the shaman as nothing more than a catalyst in causing them unimaginable suffering, enough to drive them to madness. The weight of this evil burned into Marika, fueling a fire within her and igniting a savage desire for destruction, for the ruin of the Hornsent. Not just those that subjugated her people, but all of them. Every village, every peasant, even the children. A vision of a vengeful, blazing inferno, which would burn all of them indiscriminately. This hatred was channeled into a new life, and Marika gave birth to a child, which embodied these desires. A child with a vision of fire, a child cursed by the form of a serpent, manifested from the base desire for vengeance and destruction. This child, born on the outskirts of Bonny Village, was Messmer. I came to this conclusion based on a number of factors. First, that the nearby headless corpse of a shaman ancestor gives us the "O Mother" gesture, allowing us to interact with a similarly headless statue of Marika, which leads to the shaman village. Another statue of Marika is found nearby in Messmer's chamber, and almost certainly depicts his infancy. The name of this gesture and its link to Marika imply that the nearby snakeskin is linked to his birth and his curse. It is also important to note that Messmer doesn't just summon serpents, he transforms into one himself. He could have produced this snakeskin. A similar but much larger snakeskin is found within the Volcano Manor, alongside the Serpent's Amnion, which states, "Amnion from the mother's womb, which cradled the poor unwanted offspring of a repellent birthing ritual." This links snakeskins to the concept of birth. While similar, there is no evidence that these serpents have any direct relation outside of the shared concept. Of course, this is just one interpretation of abstract environmental details, so other theories are valid, but with the evidence we are given, I feel like this theory has the most support. Messmer is also likely to be the child of Marika and Radagon, two halves which at this point were a single being. Messmer follows the M naming convention for children of this pair, Melania, Mikola, and Melina, and now Messmer. These children are all cursed, and Melania's remembrance tells us that these curses were because they are children of a single god. Messmer's red hair is also a clear mark of the children of Radagon. So, the reason Messmer is cursed is due to his singular parentage, but the dark and fiery nature of his curse is related to an aspect of Marika, her hatred for the Hornsent. Each of these four demigods also has an associated butterfly which embodies their curse. Rot for Melania, Nascence for Mikola, Fire for Melina and Messmer, with Messmer's black firefly also carrying a darkness evocative of his hate and the abyssal serpent. After the birth of Messmer, what comes next is veiled in mystery. But we know, based on the story trailer, that Marika was involved in a seduction and a betrayal. It's most likely that Marika escaped Bonny Village after giving birth to Messmer, and then later infiltrated Belorat society. It's unlikely they would have trusted her if they knew she was a shaman. It's also important to note that while previous civilizations in the lands between held the Elden Ring, such as the ancient dragons and likely the Nox, during the age of the Hornsent, godhood, and therefore the Elden Ring, was out of reach. This is why the Hornsent built the Spiral Tower near Elim, and the Divine Gate at its apex, to claim the Elden Ring for themselves, with their own god as its vessel. Marika, as an Empyrean chosen as a candidate for godhood by her two fingers, would have been a very attractive prospect for achieving this goal. We learn from the Secret Rite scroll, which describes the secret rite of the Divine Gateway, that a lord will usher in a god's return, and the lord's soul will require a vessel. So, it's very possible that this seduction was literal. Marika may have seduced the lord of the Hornsent, then betrayed him and his people when she rose to godhood. The Hornsent Grandam does call Marika a strumpet, after all. It is also possible that this seduction is referring more generally to the Hornsent as a whole, seducing the Tower folk by convincing them she could use her Empyrean status to become their vessel for the Elden Ring. Either way, she betrayed the Hornsent, veiling their lands in shadow, effectively imprisoning them, taking the Elden Ring for herself, and establishing the Erd Tree as the object of faith in place of their White Tower. The story trailer seems to imply that Messmer's crusade occurs immediately following Marika's ascent to godhood, based on the line,
What followed was a war unseen.
but there are a number of reasons this cannot be the case. We know from the remembrance of Commander Gaius that both Messmer and Gaius were as elder brothers to the lion, and both were cursed from birth. in spite of, or perhaps because of this very reason. Gaius was both Messmer's friend and the leader of his men. The lion being referred to in this case is Radon, who, according to Gaius's armor, studied gravity magic alongside the boar rider under the tutelage of an alabaster lord. This indicates that the crusade occurred much later in the timeline, after the marriage of Radagon and Rennala, the parents of Radon. We can narrow down this time frame even further through the presence of Rellana and her Carian forces within Messmer's army. Once a Carian princess, Rellana disavowed her birthright and chose to stand at Messmer's side instead, knowing full well that not even the brilliance of the moon could grant him succor. Before long, she became known as the Sword of Messmer. From Rellana's helm, we learn a more important clue. Ornate helm of Rellana, the twin moon knight, fashioned from silver steel. Rennala, head of the royal family of Caria, was said to have given her younger sister, who renounced her lineage to chase after Messmer, a gift of lustrous black hair. The Crusades were undertaken on Marika's orders, and it only really makes sense for Rennala to have gifted her sister a token of support such as this if Radagon had yet to abandon her to become Marika's consort, leaving the Full Moon Queen broken and throwing the Erdtree's alliance with Caria and Raya Lucaria into turmoil. On a side note, there's one last thing we have to reconcile in order to accept that Messmer is Marika's firstborn. Godric's Great Rune states that the first demigods were the Elden Lord Godfrey and his offspring, the Golden Lineage. As much as I hate to contradict any clearly outlined lore statements like this, Messmer's story is so clearly linked to Marika's past in the Land of Shadow that I think we have to critically think about this claim. One thing to consider is that Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, is not the first Elden Lord at all. Placidusax is. In the same way, I think the Golden Lineage was the first officially recognized demigods within the Golden Order. Compared to Messmer, Godwyn is a much better ideal for Marika's firstborn, even receiving the moniker, the Golden. Compare that to the cursed, serpentine Messmer. Marika had to take drastic measures just to hold Messmer's affliction at bay. A malevolent snake writhed within Messmer, and so his very mother plucked out his eye and put in its place a seal of grace. Marika was scared of her own base desires, which were reflected in her child, and what he could unleash upon her own order. Despite this, Messmer was still formally recognized as a demigod during this period, as his men describe him as Marika's child. While he was not fit to be a figurehead of the Golden Order as Godwyn was, as long as his true nature was sealed by grace and hidden from the masses, he could pass for one of the many demigods of the Golden Lineage. So, with that information, I think the most likely series of events is as follows. After rising to godhood, Marika sealed the lands of the Hornsent in shadow, using a divine veil which mirrors the baldachin within her bedchamber. In the beginning, everything was in opposition to the Erdtree, and so despite her desire for vengeance, Marika had more pressing concerns than the imprisoned Hornsent. The forces of the Erdtree, led by Godfrey and Marika, slaughtered the fire giants, crushed the Stormlord, and won countless victories. When the Erdtree faced a foe it could not defeat in the Liurnian Wars, Marika instead turned to Seduction, as she did against the Hornsent, to bring the Carians to heel. Splitting Radagon from herself, he made peace with Rennala and became her consort. After this, Messmer clearly stayed with the Carian royal family, possibly to avoid being seen by the judging eyes of the faithful in Leyndell. It was at the Carian manor where he acted as an elder brother to Radon, befriended the Albinaric Gaius, and caught the eye and heart of Rellana, the Carian queen's younger sister. At some point during this time, despite being sealed in shadow, the Hornsent laid a curse on Marika.
A curse upon the strumpet's progeny, upon Marika's children, each and all. The curse of the omen shall strike thee down.
Likely as a result of this curse, two demigods in the Golden Lineage, Mohg and Morgott, were born as Omen, covered in horns. These two children were blameless, yet they would receive no mercy all the same, and were thrown into the sewers of Leyndell. This curse would have only fueled Marika's hatred for the Hornsent. And so, after the Erd Tree's last worthy foe fell, and at the height of Marika's power and martial strength, she turned her attention back to the land of shadow. And at long last, she would have her vengeance. As Leda tells us, Messmer's war against the Hornsent was a purge without honor or grace. The warriors who fought in the crusade set aside both honor and mercy to wantonly impale and scorch those deemed impure. Those who felt invigorated by each cry of death were the same men who were certain of the sanctity of the campaign. A Hornsent shade in the gravesite plain laments. Everyone burned to cinders, burned away, put to the torch by Messmer and his lot. What did we do to deserve such a fate? We merely lived our lives. We lived in peace. As always, the flame of vengeance burns the guilty and the innocent indiscriminately. Marika had another reason for sending Messmer on this crusade. A malevolent snake writhed within Messmer, and so his very mother plucked out his eye and put in its place a seal of grace. Yet, having done so, her fear compelled her to secret away her child within the realm of shadow, hidden away, keeping company with the original sin, and a hatred that would not be confined. This crusade was a prison sentence. As we already discussed, Messmer's curse is representative of Marika's hatred toward the Hornsent, and base desire for the ruin of their race. This curse and these desires are embodied by the base serpent. This is the aspect of Messmer that Marika feared, her uncontrollable anger, and what led her to abandon him. She feared the darkness within herself, which she had imparted upon Messmer in the form of a curse. But this curse was not who Messmer was. Instead, Messmer's defining characteristic seems to be loyalty to his mother and to her vision for the world. And yet he knew all too well that he did not fit within that vision. Messmer despised his own fire. Time and time again he hoped to rid himself of it, but ever did it burn. On his mother's wishes, Messmer made himself a symbol of fear, undertaking the cleansing crusade she desired. Direct thy maledictions, thine ire, thine grief towards me alone. He acts selflessly in his mother's interests. This duality between Messmer's self-sacrifice and his destructive curse is mirrored by his serpents. The winged snakes were Messmer's constant companions. They were there when the base serpent was sealed away behind his eye. They were there through his eternity of suffering. They will accompany him yet in this hideous new form, born when he destroyed the grace granted by his mother. They have accepted his fate as much as he. The winged serpents represent Messmer himself, and also seem to be considered less offensive than other snakes within the lore. I think this is because the winged serpents are considered elevated above their flawed nature by their more holy and draconic traits. This is why characters react so harshly to Messmer's base serpent, despite his relation to snakes being obvious even before his seal of grace was removed.
'Twas sublime. A very tangle of snakes. To think he dared call us savages, when he himself was most base of all.
A part of Messmer must have realized he had been abandoned. As the years following the crusade passed, even his followers started to see the truth. No, such a thing is utterly inconceivable. We have not been abandoned. Messmer is the son of Queen Marika. Her grace would never abandon her own flesh and blood. Impenetrable thorns is the sorcery of those who abandon the practice of incantations after devout faith rewarded them only with despair. The image of the twisted shadow tree is an edict. Denounce their ways, do them harm, for they have abandoned us. Messmer knew what he was, despising his curse and its lightless nature, but he would remain loyal to his mother's wishes because a small part of him would always believe that she would come back, that she would find a way to save him and serve as his guiding light once more. A special physic blessed by Marika, the queen of the Erd Tree. Marika once created several of these physics for Messmer's sake, but never again. Messmer never fully gave up, that is, until we, a tarnish, destined for lordship, arrive in the land of shadow.
Mongrel intruder. That tarnished, it seemeth. Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light?
Messmer has done everything his mother asked of him. He embarked on an endless crusade in the Shadowlands, purging the lightless creatures therein. And yet, here before him stands living proof that Marika would sanction one so devoid of light, the exact kind of person he embarked on this quite literally God-forsaken crusade to destroy. Everything he's done, all that he's sacrificed, it's all for nothing. Forgotten, seemingly, by his own mother.
Not suffer. A lord devoid of light. No, mother. Forgive me.
And so, he breaks the seal of grace holding back the base serpent, embracing his oblivion, all to destroy us. Because in his eyes, we are Marika's betrayal, and he can deny his abandonment no longer. He will not accept a lord devoid of light, a lord like him.
Soon tarnished. Wilt thou be taken in the jaws of the abyssal serpent, shorn of light?
As Messmer's life fades away, he finally accepts who his true curse was all along.
Mother. Marika, a curse upon thee.